Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. A really explosive report in The Intercept about the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI. I mean, just straight up coordinating with Facebook, Twitter, to censor, quote, disinformation and misinformation they don't like. If you recall, the Department of Homeland Security was set up after 9/11 to combat Al Qaeda and terrorism and the whole war on terror thing, which was obviously largely abused. But now it seems to be basically working directly with big tech to combat misinformation. What could go wrong? I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's a pretty long story. Check it out at The Intercept. I'll read some of it. This is from Lee Fong and Ken Klippenstein. So great investigative reporting. They obtained documents, text messages. Behind closed doors and through pressure on private platforms, the U.S. government has used its power to try and shape online discourse. According to meeting minutes and other records appended to a lawsuit filed by Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt, a Republican who's running for Senate, discussions have ranged from the scale and scope of government intervention in online discourse to the mechanics of streamlining takedown requests for false or intentionally misleading information. Quote, platforms have got to get comfortable with government. It's really interesting how hesitant they remain. Microsoft executive Matt Masterson, a former DHS official, texted Jen Easterly, a DHS director, in February. That's pretty chilling. Yes, platforms need to get comfortable with the government telling them what they can and cannot allow to be on their platforms. They need to get comfortable working with, i.e., being obedient when the government tells them to remove certain content for misinformation, disinformation, et cetera, et cetera. This is what George Orwell warned about. This is very dystopian in 1984, if you ask me. In a March meeting, Laura Demlow, an FBI official, warned that the threat of subversive information on social media could undermine support for the U.S. government. Demlow, according to notes of the discussion attended by senior executives from Twitter and J.P. Morgan Chase, wonder why J.P. Morgan Chase was there, stressed that, quote, we need a media infrastructure that is held accountable. Quote, we do not coordinate with other entities when making content moderation decisions, and we independently evaluate content in line with the Twitter rules. The spokesperson for Twitter wrote in a statement, yeah, I guess Twitter is just, saying don't believe these texts and documents. There's also a formalized process for government officials to directly flag content on Facebook or Instagram and request that it be throttled or suppressed through a special Facebook portal that requires a government or law enforcement email to use. At the time of writing, quote, the content request system at facebook.com/xtakedown/login is still live. DHS and Meta, the parent company of Facebook, didn't respond to a request for comment. The FBI declined to comment. So this is what I've been talking about. Obviously, people are concerned about straight up censorship, people being banned or suspended from platforms, Twitter, Facebook. But I have said there's also shadow censorship that is a major concern. And this is basically Twitter, Google, YouTube, their algorithms picking and choosing winners. So for years, particularly on here, but also on Twitter, these algorithms have basically propped up mainstream news. When I say mainstream, Google calls it authoritative news, like CNN and Fox News. You have algorithms that elevate, CNN journalists, MSNBC people, New York Times, Washington Post, Daily Beast, all the kind of mainstream corporate press, and in their algorithm bury independent journalists like yours truly. I mean, I have 125,000 followers on Twitter. I have people all the time telling me I don't even see your tweets. I've been what they call deranked in Twitter's algorithm for years. And in some cases, people are just shadow banned, even though Twitter claims that they don't do that. They do. But you have also suppression on Google I mean, the CEO of YouTube openly admitted, yeah, for, newer, smaller channels, i.e. independent channels, you're not going to be as visible, while authoritative channels like Fox and CNN, that's who they describe as authoritative, will be more visible. If you ever look on Google or YouTube in the trending section for news, it's always CNN, the Washington Post, CNBC, Bloomberg, mainstream outlets that 5 years ago were getting thousands of views on their videos. Now we're getting hundreds of thousands of views. So there is deliberate algorithmic suppression. And what this story shows is essentially the DHS and FBI are apparently have a direct line where they could post, as long as they're using a government email, what content they want suppressed through algorithms. That is really, really dangerous and really, really scary shit. And as it says here, there's a formalized process for government officials to directly flag content on Facebook or Instagram that it wants throttled or suppressed. DHS's mission to fight disinformation stemming from concerns around Russian influence in the 2016 presidential election began taking shape during the 2020 election and over efforts to shape discussions around vaccine policy during the coronavirus pandemic. Documents collected by The Intercept from a variety of sources, including current officials and publicly available reports, reveal the evolution of more active measures by DHS. According to a draft copy of DHS's quadrennial Homeland Security Review, DHS's capstone report outlining the department's strategy and priorities in the coming year, the department's plans to target, quote, inaccurate information on a wide range of topics include the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic and the efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines, racial justice, U.S. withdrawals from Afghanistan, and the nature of U.S. support to Ukraine. The challenge is particularly acute in marginalized communities, the report states, which are often the targets of false or misleading information, such as false information on voting procedures targeting people of color. The inclusions of the 2021 U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan is particularly noteworthy, given that House Republicans, should they take the majority in the midterms, have vowed to investigate. Quote, "This makes Benghazi look like a much smaller issue," said Congressman Mike Johnson, a member of the Armed Services Committee, adding that finding answers will be a top priority. How disinformation is defined by the government has not been clearly articulated, and the inherently subjective nature of what constitutes disinformation provides a broad opening for DHS officials to make politically motivated determination about what constitutes dangerous speech. DH justifies these goals, which have expanded far beyond its original purview on foreign threats to encompass disinformation originating domestically, by claiming that terrorist threats can be, quote, exacerbated by misinformation and disinformation spread online. But the laudable goal of protecting Americans from danger has often been used to conceal political maneuvering. In 2004, for instance, DHS officials faced pressure from the George W. Bush administration to heighten the national threat level for terrorism in a bid to influence voters prior to the election. U.S. officials have routinely lied about an array of issues, from the causes of its wars in Vietnam and Iraq to their more recent obfuscation around the role of the National Institutes of Health in funding the Wuhan Institute's virology's coronavirus research. We could also add them lying about the JFK assassination, but that's neither here or there. This is a major, major investigative report. Naturally, it's not getting a lot of attention in corporate press. Lee Fang went on Tucker Carlson last night. Wouldn't be my first choice, but I'm pretty sure he's not getting his doors knocked down by CNN and MSNBC to cover this. Let's take a listen to what he had to say on Tucker's show.
Broke this story. He's an investigative journalist at The Intercept. He joins us tonight. Lee, thanks so much for coming on. This seems like a really important story, which is for some reason being ignored. Do we get the outlines right? The administration is working with the tech companies to censor people.
Yeah, that's right. You know, Tucker, we looked at really hundreds of documents that paint a vivid picture of the FBI, the DHS, closely collaborating with the top social media platforms, Twitter and Facebook, to censor various forms of content under the banner of fighting disinformation. And the story shows a couple of things. One, it shows what you just mentioned, a very cozy relationship between the government and these tech giants. There's those monthly meetings that you just mentioned, but also just very cozy emails and texts. Not a very adversarial relationship. You know, we looked at one text where Microsoft executive texts Jen Easterly, the top disinfo director at DHS appointed by Biden, basically saying the government needs to get, the private sector needs to get more comfortable with the government. They're closely collaborating on reports talking about the expanded role for DHS in censoring a really broad collection of topic areas, of policy and political topics. And, you know, just broadly speaking, the story also just looks at the mission creep of DHS. This is an agency that was founded in the aftermath of 9/11 to combat foreign terror threats of Al-Qaeda and the like. But over the last 5 years, it's kind of evolved in its mission. It's moved towards fighting disinfo, and their justification is, you know, disinformation radicalizes the homeland. It can lead to disruptions in public health or in political violence. So they have a justification. We have these documents, and they're pushing forward with this broad censorship agenda.
Criticizing the people in charge is dangerous. You know, I don't know why you did this story at the Intercept. I'm just so grateful that you did. It's a great story. It's a huge public service. I hope you're rewarded for it.
Gotta love the weird dig. I don't know why you did it at the Intercept. Maybe because the Intercept would provide him the resources to investigate the story and provide him the time to investigate the story, and no other outlet would. Definitely not Fox News. By the way, Fox News, if you remember, was kind of like the #1 cheerleader for the Iraq War and the lies that went into the Iraq War. But I digress. I don't fault Lee for going anywhere to get this story out, including Tucker Carlson. Great reporting. This has major ramifications, because make no mistake, whatever you think about misinformation, disinformation, and there was plenty, and there is plenty online about the election in 2020, COVID, and vaccines and things like that. The DHS, the FBI, basically kind of being cozy and working with Twitter, Google, Facebook, or Meta, whatever, has ramifications for everybody. I mean, if this is normalized and it just kind of, you know, goes hand in hand, well, what happens if there's a railroad strike? What happens if there's eventually economic boycotts? Think of what happened in Canada with the truckers. Whatever you thought of that, I mean, I don't agree with what they were protesting for in Canada, but they, you know, really hurt Canada's economy, shut down bridges that had, you know, major transport lines for goods and services. And the Canadian government basically branded them as terrorists. Well, here, if there's a general strike, if there's major worker strikes, you know, if we're not headed there anytime soon, I wish we were. If there's, you know, more workers unionizing, well, the capitalist class isn't going to like that. Can we have the DHS and the FBI viewing these workers or, you know, economic boycotts as threats and start stating that they are disinformation agents? The information that workers are putting out there, their protests are misinformation, disinformation, a threat to national security, whatever, because the capitalist class, which the FBI, DHS defends and are guardians of, brand them as a threat. And somehow they get mangled into agents of misinformation, disinformation, threats to national security, et cetera, et cetera. That's not so far-fetched at all. And frankly, we already see these tech platforms, big tech, rig their algorithms to prop up the status quo. So DHS, FBI can ask their cozy, ask the people that they're in a cozy relationship with, hey, suppress this thing, suppress this trend, suppress this strike, suppress this movement, lower it, in your algorithm, so it's barely visible. That's not just for economic actions. We're talking Black Lives Matter, indigenous protests, think Standing Rock, DACA, whatever the case may be. Anything that they could brand as disinformation, misinformation, or a threat to the homeland or national security. So this has major ramifications. To me, yeah, misinformation is a problem online. Disinformation is a problem online. Hell, I mean, you have networks that are just complete agents of misinformation, from Fox News, MSNBC in a different way, CNN. I mean, all of these outlets push lies and the corporate status quo all day long. In the case of Fox News, elevate white supremacy, violent conspiracy movements, et cetera, et cetera. The question is not, is there misinformation or disinformation, and should we combat that? The question is, who should be combating it? Should it be the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, or Mark Zuckerberg, or now Elon Musk? No. So definitely check out this Intercept story. It's great investigative reporting.